Hi, let's get started with functions. If you're from any of the coding backgrounds like Java, C++, or any basic coding language, you might know what exactly functions are. But I'll give you a small overview about what exactly functions are and how exactly it is written in Rust and what are the properties of functions in Rust. Might be a good recap for you. So let's get started with our VS Code editor. What I'll do here is I'll remove the existing code and I'll write a couple of print statements. Let's write print hi. Let's write print ln hello, and the last statement will be say good morning. Okay. Now, if I do clear the terminal and if I do a cargo run, you'll see hi, hello, and good morning in chronological order. But I want to avoid writing these many, like this much of code, or a block of code. What I could do here is, in order to do that, I could write a small function which starts with fn and name it hi. Now what will happen here is I could just move this print statement, could copy it, paste it here. Now what this function will do, whenever we call hi, it will print hi. Similarly, I could do it for hello, copy this function or copy this print statement, paste it here and save it. And similar for another function called morning. I'll basically copy it, paste it, and done. Now what I could do here is I could basically delete all the print statements here and call these or call these methods directly. Could write hello, I could write morning, and yeah, let me try to run this cargo run. And you could see we have the same statement printed out with respect to what we have initially printed, and these are in the same order. Now if I want to change the order, I could just remove it from here, remove hello from here, and paste it, do a cargo run. Now good morning comes before hello. So this is the basic understanding of functions. You could abstract your code, you could move your code which is already used and put it in a coding block or a function to that so that you could reuse it again and again. Now if someone wants to call uh, morning before inside hi itself, they could do it, right? Okay, I forgot to add a semicolon. So we have hi, good morning. Since hi is called first, then it will call internally morning. Then morning will be printed, and then you'll have hi. So it basically follows the chronology, right? Now, you have to be very careful in this case as well. So if uh, hi calls morning and morning again calls hi, it becomes a loop, right? So you should avoid these scenarios. I could just demonstrate it to you. So what I'm doing here is from the main function, I'm calling hi function. Hi function is internally calling morning function, and morning function is internally calling hi again. Now this becomes a loop. What exactly is happening here is if both the functions keep on calling each other recursively or again and again, we get into an indefinite loop. You don't know, or the system will not be able to handle it, and you don't know when exactly the program will exit, right? There's no exit conditions here. So you should avoid these kind of scenarios when you are calling functions. Let's see how exactly Rust compiler handles this part actually. So if you do a cargo run, the compiler will say the thread main has overflowed its stack. So basically functions are stored inside a stack, and if you're calling a function again and again, the stack basically fills and it starts overflowing. We'll discuss about this topic later in the series, but keep in mind it should not be a cyclic dependency, or it should not be internal call to the same function again and again without any specific ending conditions, because in that case your program will keep on running indefinitely and you'll find this error thrown by the compiler. Now if you go to the Notion doc, I'll try to explain what exactly function parameters are and how exactly they are used. Now in these three functions, if you see, they do not accept any arguments. they do not return anything. They just go for the print statements. So if I just delete these functions and write a function, let's take an example from the doc itself. So if I write a function of printing a sum, uh, print sum, say A is I32 and B is I32 again, and what we do here is we do a print ln A plus B, and we call print sum here with 4 or 3 comma 4, 3 comma 5, I suppose. What we'll do here is, what we're doing here is, from the main function, we are calling the print sum statement, a print sum function, and we are basically printing the addition of these two numbers or I32 values. Now, these terms A and B of type I32 are called the parameters, and 3 and 5 are the arguments which are being passed inside this function. So if we do a cargo run, oh, I need to add uh, braces here in order to print it. So if we do a cargo run, you could see 8 has been printed here, which means the sum is computed. Now, there could be some scenarios where you do not need to print, or there could be scenarios when you need to return the values actually. Now, how do you do it? If you go to the Notion doc, I've mentioned it here. So if functions have to return a value, we have to use this arrow key to specify the return type of that specific function, and it will basically return it. So if I do an arrow key here and say I32 is my return type, because if you add an I32 with an I32, you'll get an I32 in response, right? I'll remove this print statement. And what I'll do is I'll just write A plus B. I'm saving it. I'll just clear the terminal. I'll do a cargo run. So since we are not printing it, what I'll do is I'll just write a print ln yeah, let's run this. So if you see, you have the same output here as well. So this I32 is basically a return type, and this is the value which you're returning. Now you might see I haven't put a semicolon here and the compiler doesn't say anything. Why exactly is this happening? It is happening because this particular operation is returned from this method itself. Now, why exactly is this happening? Before I explain it, why exactly this is happening, I'll try to explain what exactly a return keyword is. So if you put a return keyword here, it means this function is going to return a plus b whenever it is called. So if it is called from here itself, this print function will return a plus b. Now any code which is after a return statement will always be unreachable. You cannot reach that part of the code. I'll show you via an example. If I do a cargo run, unreachable statement. So this particular part is not reachable. I have to put a semicolon actually here, not one. So this becomes an unreachable statement. So once a return keyword is used, the code below that becomes dead, and Rust compiler will not be able to reach to that particular part, or your code execution will not happen. Now, there is a special case. If you do not put a semicolon after any expression or a new line, and you do not put a return statement itself, the Rust compiler thinks that this is probably the return type or the returning value from the function. That's why we do not have a semicolon here in your initial implementation. Now, but there could be different cases. Like if you're writing any conditional statement, in that case, you'll have to write a return statement actually. For example, let's say if we just print those numbers or some of those numbers, which have the sum greater than 10. So if a plus b is greater than 10, what we'll do is we'll return basically uh, a plus b. Else, what we do is we return 0, let's say. Now, if you could see, I have put a return statement here and I haven't put anything here. Now, if this condition passes, we return a plus b, else we return 0. Let's see whether this compiles or not. It returns 0 because 5 plus 3 or 3 plus 5 is 8, and which is less than 10. So if I say it's not 3, it's 30. See, 13 plus 5 is 18, so we have returned a plus b. So having a return statement is completely dependent on your use case, and if you do not have a use case, coming up with a default return value is something which I'll suggest. Now there are more cases here. If I go to this document, if your function is not returning anything, it is basically returning an empty tuple, actually, which is called a basic unit type. If you do not put a semicolon, then that particular value is our return value, which we have already explained, or which we have already seen. Now, the last property which is remaining is that functions can return multiple values using tuples. So if we go back to the example which we already had, say suppose this print sum function will return more than one value. Let's say both of them were I32. So what I'll do here is I'll just update the return uh, tuple or the return values with two I32 values, and the type will be I32 because we are dealing with numbers right now. Now, what happens here is if the conditional statement will just update the returns with a plus b and a minus b, and the default values I'll put it as 0, 0. Okay. Now these values will not be handled here. Let's say we have two values here, response 1 and response 2, say we call it, and I'll have print sum with 13 comma 3. Okay, now what we do is we basically print with exclamation and put colon braces response 1 print ln colon response 2. Now this particular function, if the sum is greater than 10, will return a plus b and a minus b, and if it is less than that, will return 0 comma 0. Let's see whether we are able to compile this or not. Now 13 plus 3 is 16 and 13 minus 3 is 10. So basically we are printing both the values here. If I just try to reduce this value to say suppose 5 comma 3 and do a cargo run, we'll get 0 comma 0. So now you could see the function itself is returning more than one value. It is returning both the I32 values from the operations here in function. So this was the last property which we wanted to discuss, and the Notion doc is in the description. So if you want to have a look at the code snippets or go through these notes, feel free to use it. And yeah, see you in the next one. Bye.